Welcome back, guys, to the ARTFUL Podcast. It's Matteo here, your host. If you're new to the podcast, welcome for the first time, and I hope you enjoy your first episode. And if you're a veteran, don't forget to subscribe, to like the video, to share it to everyone. That's really important for the channel. More people subscribe, more are the chances that I'm gonna be able to interview more artists, and because numbers are important in this time, and if I have more subscription and more likes, it's easier for me to convince for artists to interview them. So it's really important. Subscribe. And today episode we have CLARE THATCHER. She's a great, successful artist. I'm really blessed that she was willing to talk to me, and it was a great conversation. We talk about how important colors are for her and how composition of her landscape are important. So, no further ado, this was CLARE Studio Chat. For today's episode, we have CLARE with us. How are you doing, CLARE? You okay?
Yes, very well, thank you.
We met, well, we didn't really met as we were talking before. We didn't really met in person, but you came to my university and do a lecture, and which was really inspiring, and it was really interesting, all your works to see and stuff. That's when I think when I start like following on Instagram and be even more curious about it, and I just found your work really interesting and quite different from other stuff that I see online.
Good.
And
yes, I'm pleased about that.
And I was wondering, something that I ask everybody. Oh, first of all, why you don't introduce yourself and make a little intro and what you do and where you're from,
okay.
And your background.
Okay, well, I'm a painter, and I'm actually from Bristol, and I'm living like 10 miles outside of the centre of Bristol in a place called Thornbury, which is in South Gloucestershire, where I have my studio, and I can walk to my studio, which is lovely. And my studio is in a place called Clash Art Space, and it's a group of 8 studios that I co-run with another artist called Shirley Sharp, and we've been here for 5 years now, just celebrating our 5th anniversary. And we sublet out the studio space to other local artists, and they're all professional practicing artists, recent graduates, more accomplished, established artists as well. So that's a really good thing
really
for me to keep in contact with other artists. And my practice is deeply connected to a sense of place, and I enjoy being in coastal and tidal areas, and I use drawing into painting. And I graduated from UWE on the Drawing and Applied Arts course in 2014, and I went straight on to do my master's in fine art at Bath Spa University, and I did that in 12 months. So I graduated in 2015, and I've been practicing since then. So 5 years, just over 5 years basically.
Okay, and is that really good for you having all these artists in your studio, like living, doing practicing in your studios, near your studio?
Yes. Well, it's yes, because the reason I set up the studios was that when I was about to graduate from my MA, it was very important for me to have a studio space, and I was on a number of waiting lists at the time, and didn't seem to be anything coming available. So waiting lists like in shared studios in Bristol. So, for example, Spike Island, the Jamaica Street studio. So it was just by chance that I saw this space. It was an empty space in Thornbury, and I just took the plunge, really. But it's been really helpful, because it's the first time I've ever done anything like this, to actually set up and run the space with another artist, because we do support each other. Because there's, like anything, there's more to running anything like this than you would think. So we've learned a lot as we've gone along, and to have other artists, coming in and out, and just like we are all individual, but it's just nice sometimes to speak to someone, because as you can appreciate, being an artist can be quite isolating and lonely.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
So it's kind of having that network and that rapport with other people. And I think coming straight out of being a student, where you're used to having lots of people around you, I kind of felt I needed that at the time.
It's true. It's one of the reasons why, as I said before in this podcast, it's one of the reasons why I did start this podcast, is because obviously I finished uni almost 8 years ago, and being every day in a space where there is literally like 20, 40 artists all working together, and it's all this vibrant studio, which there is so much going on. It's so inspiring being there. And then when you graduate, you're just on your own, and it's really shocking. It's especially if you fade from those, like, these kind of vibes, and especially after with the lockdown, I did start working a lot, doing a lot of drawings, a lot of paintings, but there was something missing, which was the interaction with other artists and just talking about it and just expressing yourself and make your idea, just say your idea out loud, which helps a lot. And
this is one thing I say, and I've heard other artists say, when you do graduate and become an artist on your own, the one thing I miss, and I still do miss it, is saying it and talking about your work. And I think you, like anything, you get out of the practice of saying it. It's going on inside you and in your head so much all the time. But to actually have a conversation with someone else, a deep, meaningful conversation, like you do on the degree courses, I think, for myself, I do miss that.
Yeah, and for sure.
When I haven't said it for a while, it can almost be a bit sort of jittery coming out. It doesn't flow.
Yeah, you
away,
need to keep,
and then when you start to, get into the swing of it again, it's good to hear what you think, and it sort of gives you a bit of a confirmation, even if it sounds not a good idea. It can sound rubbish, terrible, not coherent what you're saying, but you need to hear that to then realise, what you're doing isn't maybe such a good way of saying or doing it, or it is. Or I thought, oh yeah, that sounds really good. Or it's like, oh yes, I see now what I'm doing.
Yeah.
I understand now what I'm trying to portray here on my drawing that I'm making or my paintings. It's
Yeah,
does that make sense?
yeah,
Sorry,
especially
but
no, that for sure it does, and especially in the period of time that we are living now, after like 5 months of lockdown, and we couldn't be able to see anybody, and
no.
especially even if you talk to to people that are not interested in art, and you start talking about art, you can see that their faces and be like, okay, can we just change something, which is fine. Just
Yeah.
something they are not interested in, and you're like, just start talking and never finish. So it's really
But
important.
also, I will say there is a place as well for being completely on your own and immersed in what you're doing.
It's
that is as important as sharing and talking through your ideas.
For sure.
And I think it's getting that balance. I can go for long periods of being totally immersed in the moment, in what I'm doing, and I don't want any noise, anyone around. And I think when you are in shared studios, or there's a number of studios around you, it's important that everyone, and I think as artists we do know, to respect and to know when someone doesn't want to engage or talk to them for very long. So I think there is a place and a time for both.
It's true. How did you manage the lockdown? Did your practice was influenced by, because you got the studio separate from your house?
Yes, that's right.
Did you manage to do some work, or it was a?
Yes, well, like everyone else, I think it was initially it was quite a shock.
Yeah.
And your world is completely turned upside down. But I'm very, very fortunate that, as I said, I can walk to my studio, and I could kind of justify that because I didn't, have to travel, and I wasn't going to come into any contact with anyone else because initially, in the first, I would say, 6 to 8 weeks, I was the only person coming in to the studio, so I was on my own. And there's a lot of people, many people and other artists are in a worse position than I am, and I know that. And I was very, for the first couple of weeks, quite anxious and really affected by what everything was going on. And I will say, I think my work sort of saved me and gave me a focus and a purpose, and I sort of then turned it into looking at it as an opportunity to have time to think and time to be with my work and to really go in deeper with it. And so I did more work, quite a concentrated period of time. And I felt like what a lot of other people have said, it was as though I've heard other people say this, like you hit the pause button, and it was just so eerily quiet generally around. And for me as an artist, it was quite a good time to work. And what surprised me was I had quite an outpouring of different emotions, and I expressed this in making a series of drawings, quite small to start with, A5, and I did something that I don't normally do, and that is write down words each week that reflected the emotions that I was feeling, because it was
that's interesting,
very different emotions, and I used the words and the titles to title some of the drawings that I made at the time. So, for example, to begin with, it was things like black cloud descending, a long road ahead, tree falling. This was all in the beginning, and then it sort of developed into like hopefulness.
The more positive kind of
feelings.
feelings.
Kind of, and it was a very gradual thing. And I was getting into, say, a new rhythm. So I had a couple of drawings about rhythm and resting, and we've all sort of had to find a new normal, I think, a new normal.
Yeah, for sure.
In our lives. So I really surprised myself as to what was coming out and how I was using it. And then I was starting to then develop those drawings into slightly larger ones, like A4. And this was all going on alongside my what I'm working on in my studio, generally. So
it sounds like you really adapt your practice to the feeling or the situation that you're going through, and it is something that you always had in your practice. So your practice did change over time quite a lot, or it stayed pretty much the same, but you just changed the subject, or how did?
What, during the lockdown period?
In general,
or
because it sounds it just sounds like
my work has got more and more focused on places and a place I visited, and so whether it's revisiting a particular location in a particular place, so that somewhere is accessible, I can keep going back to places where I've just been to once. So and it's they've become series of works, very so I work in series, and I guess I've always done that, but at the moment the timing was quite good, because last year I was very fortunate. I went to Alaska in May, June time. So when I was in Alaska, I made quite a lot of drawings, and so since then, since the end of last year, I've been working these drawings that I've made on location into larger line drawings, and from a number of the line drawings, I've been translating them into oil paintings of various sizes, and this is what I've been focusing on all of this year. And since I went to Alaska in May, June last year, I was very fortunate for the month of September 2019, I went on a residency to a place called Barreiro in Portugal. It's called Parda Studios, and this was in connection with Terps Painting School in London, and it was a month's residency, so I went there, and there again I made lots of work on the location we were staying on. And so when I returned from there, I had this outpouring of I made a few. It was mainly works on paper. Well, it was all works on paper actually, and so I kind of shelved that work to concentrate on the Alaska works, and they've kind of gone on a lot longer than I anticipated, and I feel the lockdown period helped that, and I feel I have so much more to say about my experience in Alaska. So the works that I made in Portugal, I kind of have to wait, and that's what,
Did you
how I work, really.
do you go travel on purpose for your art, or you just happen to go on holiday and you just
A bit of both, but wherever I go, I always have a sketchbook or a number of sketchbooks with me. So I go to Cornwall fairly often, North Cornwall. So before Alaska, I would say a lot of my work was about Cornwall. I made a whole series of works. But we're talking about particular landscape features in all these places. So it's very much I'm drawn to coastal and tidal areas, I think I might have said to you. And what has a profound effect on me, like it's an overwhelming feeling of I need to stand in front of this and I need to draw. And that's what the work becomes about in all these places. So there's like a common thread running through all of them. But what's different is how I feel and what I see in all these different places. It's very much a felt response, and then I translate this, and then it becomes very much about colour and pure colour that I work in, and it's finding an equivalent to what I felt and experienced in these places.
And how the color obviously seems really important in your work. And how do you work usually? Do you I'm assuming you made your from your pigments, from your color from the pigments. You made it yourself.
Yeah.
How do you work usually? How do you prepare to go into the canvas or like the paper? You did some painting on paper, did you?
Yes. Well, the materials are very important to my work, and I can work on, it's like a heavy rag paper, heavyweight, for the paintings, and they have this beautiful deckled edge to them, and I very much enjoy working on plywood or board and canvas, or if I can afford it, I do like to paint on linen as well. And they're all very considered pieces of work. So I think about what materials would best be good for what I want to say.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask.
The format, the size, it's all I work it out before I start. And from it all comes from the drawings, and I feel the drawing is the spine of everything, of the painting, and I feel the composition is key to the work. So working this out with a line drawing, for me, I feel is really the best way at the moment for me. And so, yes, the drawing informs what I'm going to do. So that informs the colour, the palette. When I'm drawing, I'm feeling the colour. When I'm on a location, I can sense the colours that I want to be, and so it becomes obviously memory, particularly if I've only been to, like I only went to Alaska once. I know I'm not likely to be returning there anytime soon. So by looking at my drawings I've made there, it all comes back to me. It's very, I can't really explain it. It transports me back there. And so I selected this palette, and over time, and it's quite a difficult thing to do, is paring the colour down. And by that I mean only using, say, a maximum of 5 different colours. And I thought it would be easier to work like that, but it is challenging, because you're always thinking, what if I added a bit this, a bit that?
Yeah.
But I tried to.
But you're limited on the palette.
And yes, and it can be quite striking when you have a limited palette, I find. And yes, you're saying about pigments. I love working with pure colour and pigments. And of course I use paint from the tube as well, but where I can source a pigment, I will. And so I also use good quality oil paints from the tube as well. And the only time I mix a colour, as in mixing on the palette, is when I make greys, which is quite useful to have grey. So it's about laying the colour down, and it's a layering of colour. And by that I mean the colour you have underneath another colour, as you know, will affect the colour that goes on top. So it becomes, very, there's a lot of depth to the work, and there's this surface that you get with paint from the tube, but from the pigments. It's very interesting to see how each different pigment and colour behaves on the surface, on the painting, the ground you have.
Relating to each other,
and what I love and the surprises and the excitement you get from it is how a colour behaves differently on different paintings, because it's all about the size of the space you've put the colour on, and the colours that are around it, next to it, and how they interact with each other. And that is why it's very useful, I find, to have a number of works on the go at the same time. They all talk to each other, inform each other, forming.
You get influenced by.
And there's this constant conversation going on, and it's thrilling.
That's something.
And as well as really not thrilling and exciting sometimes. It's this, well, as you can appreciate, you're a painter yourself. It's it's a push and pull, isn't it? One moment you're feeling wow, fantastic, and then the next day it's it's very much a roller coaster.
Just one brushstroke, and then you completely change your feeling with your painting. It's really, it gets really personal. It's really interesting. The color is so important for you, especially like you're working in those landscapes, but it seems like it brings you this feeling of what you said before. Even before you said, I was thinking when I saw your artwork, they're like memory. They're like those dream plays that it brings you in this sort of dimension that it's not reality, but at the same time it makes whole sense, and it's you can see what the painting is going for. It's really, really interesting. I think the use of color, the understanding of color that you have, it's another level, and it's such a great great artworks. Really interesting.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, it comes with doing it, doesn't it? Over time, and you're learning.
Yeah,
by doing
takes
it,
it practice.
you know. And I'm learning all the time.
And yeah, especially even yeah, even the location. It seems so personal. Even if you, as you said, you've been to Alaska one time, but with the painting and the color that you choose and the composition and how you place the colors next to each other, it just seems like there is something so deep and personal in the landscape, which is fantastic to see.
Yeah, thank you.
And I'm really curious, how do you choose the subject matter of the painting, so of the landscape? Because I have no idea how you can choose a landscape, because I do portrait. I try to do landscape so many times, but it seems like I don't understand. It doesn't click. I don't have the feeling of like, oh, I want to paint this or I want to draw this. How do you choose the, like, what you're gonna paint, the mountain or the landscape in general, the part of the landscape? How are you gonna choose? How you choose that?
Well, I think, like I said, well, it's so, like, I understand what you're saying, and when you go out into the world, it's vast.
Yeah, there is so much to see.
Particularly by the sea, by the coast, it's just so awe-inspiring, and I think it just has an overwhelming effect on me. And I'm definitely connected and drawn to the sea, the actual sea and the movement. But I also did a series of works. I'm very interested in the movement of the sea and the coast. So, when the tide comes in and goes out, and what's left behind, and the marks on the sand or the mud. I love mud. It's like, I know it sounds crazy, but it's delicious when I look at it. And I guess how I select it's when I think, it's just, everything is just wow.
There is something.
And then I'm deciding then, I guess. And it's mountain, rock formations, the sea has gone out, and there we are. It's revealed
the composition of the
rock formations, the different shapes, and you can go back to that spot time and time again, different times of the day, which I have done, and it's different. It's never the same. And I guess you're not the same, different time of the day, different season, all that. And yes, and then I'm at on that moment, I think I get the sketchbook out. And it's not always easy when you're outside,
Yeah.
And I've learnt to travel light, because, I've taken loads of stuff sometimes, inks and charcoal and pencil and this and that, and this size book, that size book. And it puts you off, kind of, like, I can't get it out, it's too much. But if you just take one sketchbook, a pencil, say,
big enough, yeah.
Don't even have it in your bag. I'll go on a walk and I'll carry it in my hand, and then it's
ready to go.
Immediate. It's more instantaneous. It's here. I can draw.
Do you ever...
rather than sometimes it can be too cold. It can be windy. It can be raining. And you don't bother. Say, there's that. And if you haven't done it for a while, because I have periods where I'm in my studio and I'm head down and I'm working and I haven't gone out anywhere, particularly in the lockdown, and then that moment you go out, and it's awkward. It's difficult, even though I've done it many times.
Yeah, I can imagine drawing under the rain. It doesn't sound great. So you were talking how you like the experience of being in a place in a different times. It's a different feeling for you. I was curious. Do you ever take picture to work with?
I used to rely on the photograph, but yes, I do take photographs, but just for reference.
Yeah.
Because I find that the drawings have more emotion and record the moment better for myself.
That's I think for me, well, I do work in picture, like from photo most of the time, because sitting with a person for like a long time, that it's not really convenient for the other person. Stay there for 4 hours sitting.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, it's a bit hard. Yeah.
It's a bit different, isn't it? It's a different way of working.
Yeah, it is.
Everyone, I think, finds their way of working, and there is no right or wrong in any of this.
No,
it's just
for sure.
what works for you, I think.
There was I did a lot of like life drawing during the uni course, and it was really good. It just obviously it's a different way of approaching the page, the paper, and it was really interesting to see the whole from life, how it was developed, the drawing. And
yes, because I have done quite a lot of life drawing in the past, and even if you're not going to be drawing the figure, using the figure in your work, it's always relevant to what you do, because it's a way of looking, isn't it, and seeing and understanding how things fit together.
Yeah, it's really.
And you need, and I guess that's why I go out and draw from life, draw what's in front of me, to then that, I expect you appreciate this, enables you then to, when you know how something fits together, you can then use your memory, and helps imagination, because you're feeding your imagination, aren't you, by drawing from life.
Yeah. Who was your biggest influence on your practice?
Who I'm looking at? Well, I look at many different artists and art. So I guess, the great colourists, like Patrick Heron, of course Bonnard and Boulard, and I tend to keep revisiting certain artists, and I think a key one for me was Graham Sutherland, and I would say Wilhelmina Barnes Graham, one of the St Ives painters, and I managed to recently go to see, they had a show of her work at the RWA in Bristol, and I also, when I do go to St Ives, I do like to see her work. But the show at the RWA, it was called Inspirational Journeys, and that particularly resonated with what I do,
what you do
in my work, and it showed just different places that she had made work about and from, and so her works, her paintings and her drawings and her etchings are a big influence, and contemporary artists, that I've been looking at. When I was doing my MA, a big influence was Anslan Kiefer, and at the time, I think it was beginning of 2015, there was a very large show of his works at the Royal Academy. And because at the time, particularly, I was investigating materials in painting, and of course, his works, are full of that, and they're very inspirational.
It's a big part of
some of his works are just huge, massive. So that was fantastic to see. And I recently went to the Arnolfini. There's an exhibition of, I'm not sure how to pronounce her name. It's Chantal Joff, Joffe.
Okay.
I don't know if you've been to see the exhibition.
I don't think I saw that one.
Well, it's on at the moment. I really recommend it. And it was just so refreshing to see paintings and the way she paints, and particularly at the moment, because we're a bit starved of going to see live art, aren't we? And it was fantastic. Even though it's all her work's figurative, it was she paints very, very quickly, and some of them are life-size work, and there was works on paper, as well as on canvas and board. So that was really good to see. And I've been reading the catalogue on Anthony Wishaw works written by Richard Davey, and I love his writing.
Nice.
So it's very interesting reading, because he's quite elderly now, and to see the way he works, and his drawings and works on paper,
how they changed.
Obviously, over the decades. Very interesting. So that's just a few of the biggest I look at. But what's very important to me is going to see like I say, live art. Yeah,
that's something is really I found that all the time, like, so inspired after. It's just because we get busy during the day, and we forgot that kind of things. It helps you so much on putting yourself into the right mood to paint, to draw, to create. That's so important. It's really.
It's like a boost, a kickstart, when you go and you really connect with a show. And a bit like I did when I went to the Arnolfini, it was like, oh yes, and I was like all set to do massive paintings. I love working really big, and I want to go bigger, kind of thing, when I go to see works like that. But then, of course, all the practical stuff kicks in, what am I going to do with it?
I don't even have a studio, so yeah.
It shouldn't affect you, but unfortunately it does. So
it's quite.
So I'm always looking for a huge studio space that's affordable. That would be lovely.
That would be great. Anyway, Claire, thank you very much. I don't want to take too much of your time. Thank you very much for being part of the podcast, and hopefully we can manage to do the exhibition together in Paris, as we have planned.
Oh, of course, yes, we are, aren't we?
Hopefully next March. Next
that'd
March
be great.
we'll
look forward to it.
And thank you very much again, and have a good day.
All right, thank you. Bye.
That was Claire. That was an amazing conversation. Thank you very much, Claire, to be part of this podcast. Sometimes I'm so lucky that some successful artists like the one I'm interviewing are really willing to talk to me and talk to in this podcast, which is really small, but they are so lovely, and they are so helpful and nice. They want to talk to me and they want to be part of the podcast, be part of this journey. That I really believe in this, and thank you from the bottom of my heart to everybody that did the podcast and they are going to, and hopefully one day we can have an exhibition together, all together. that would be great. Anyway, guys, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so the channel can grow and I can ask even more artists to be part of it. Numbers, unfortunately, in this age, it's important. So if we can grow the number of the subscription and of the view, they will grow, and artists are more willing to talk to me in this podcast. And so I really need support. Please subscribe, like the video, share it with your friends, with your family, with everybody that you know. And thank you very much for listening. From the Artful Podcast, I'm out. And wait. Before we finish the video, I just thought that you might like to know that she's having a solo show at the VR Gallery with Tube's Artist Gallery, curated by Dennis Taylor. And she's gonna be launched on the 5th of November. And she's currently showing her work in the 2020 BIP Painting Prize show until the 11th of November. So go check it out.